Some men lift a glass because they have something to celebrate. That night, I lifted mine because I needed something to do with my hands while I memorized every word being said about my daughter in a language the people across from me were certain I could not understand. Keep smiling, Paul. Pour the wine. Nod when they look at you. Do not give them a reason to stop talking. That was what I kept telling myself at the table. I had booked the restaurant 3 weeks earlier. Field in Maine, just off King Street in downtown Leesburg. It had the kind of view I thought Henri and Colette Laurent would appreciate. Rolling hills, split-rail fences, horses grazing beyond the windows, the whole Virginia countryside laid out in a way that made the place feel established without having to announce it. I wanted my daughter Claire to have one evening where the two sides of her future family sat together and got along. That was all. Her fiancé, Adrian, had been talking about how nervous his parents were about coming to Virginia. Claire had been just as nervous about whether they would like me. I wanted to make it easy for her. Instead, before the appetizers were even finished, Henri held up the wine bottle and studied the label. "Paul, this is the Bordeaux you chose?" "It's Virginia wine," I said. "The vineyard is about 20 minutes from here." He lowered the bottle. "Ah, local." The word was polite. His face was not. Colette smiled at me. "And what is it you do again, Paul?" "Construction." She repeated the word slowly. "Construction. Contracting," I said. "Mostly custom homes these days." How practical. Then she turned away and picked up her glass. Practical. The way she said it made my profession sound like something I should apologize for. I let it pass. Claire was sitting beside Adrian, laughing at something he had whispered to her. Her fingers were folded through his, and she looked happy. That mattered more to me than whether two people from Normandy thought custom home building counted as respectable work. I had spent enough years around wealthy clients to know how condescension works. Nobody has to insult you directly. Sometimes they compliment you in a way that places you exactly where they think you belong. I had been broke before, really broke. At 24, I once slept in my truck between jobs because calling my own father and admitting I needed help felt worse than the cold. A little snobbery over dinner was not going to hurt me. For Claire, I could swallow it. What I did not expect was for Henri and Colette to decide that the safest place to insult us was right in front of me. Before I tell you what changed at that table, tell me where you're listening from tonight. Because the strange thing was, nobody there actually knew much about the years before I started my business. Before contracting became my life, I had spent 4 years working construction and infrastructure jobs overseas in my 20s. Landes, Lyon mostly, with stretches near Marseille. Nobody sent me to language school. I learned French from foremen, laborers, delivery drivers, landlords, bartenders, and men who got tired of repeating themselves when I misunderstood a measurement. By the time I came home, I could follow an argument at full speed. Then I stopped using the language. Nobody on a job site in Loudoun County cared whether their contractor could speak French. Claire had heard me use a few phrases when she was little, but that was about it. Adrian had never asked. His parents certainly had not. So when Henri leaned toward Colette halfway through dinner and said something quietly in French, neither one of them bothered to lower their voices very much. Colette answered him the same way. That was when I understood how they saw me. Not as part of the conversation, as furniture. I kept cutting my food. They started with Claire's dress. Colette glanced across the table at my daughter and described it as pretty for something bought off the rack. Henri brought up the way I had pronounced charcuterie earlier and repeated it with an exaggerated American accent. Colette covered her mouth with her napkin while she laughed. Small things, mean things, but still small enough that I could have ignored them. Then her attention moved past me toward a wall near the hostess stand. The restaurant displayed photographs of work by local craftsmen, furniture, cabinetry, stonework, things made by people in the county. One of the framed photographs showed a built-in bookshelf. I recognized it immediately. I had made it for Claire when she was 11. Reclaimed oak from an old barn that had stood on the land before our house was built. 4 months of evenings and weekends, sanding, fitting, pulling a shelf apart because it sat 1/8 of an inch wrong. Claire used to keep her horse ribbons on the second shelf. Colette looked at the photograph for a few seconds. Then she said in French that I had probably found the wood at a dump. Henri smiled. Colette added that Americans had no taste. We bolted cheap wood together and called it craftsmanship. My fork stopped halfway to the plate. I lowered it, quietly. That shelf was not expensive. I would never have pretended it was. But I remembered Claire sitting on the shop floor when she was 11, brushing sawdust off the boards with both hands and asking whether she could paint one shelf purple. I remembered telling her no. I remembered changing my mind 10 minutes later. And there was Colette, 6 feet away from me, laughing about that piece of my daughter's childhood, because she thought the man who built it was too ignorant to understand her. Nobody else noticed anything. Adrian was pouring water. Claire glanced at her phone for a second. Henri looked at me, only for a moment. Testing. I gave him an easy smile. Then I said in English, "I've always thought you can tell a lot about a person by the things they choose to build instead of buy." Henri blinked once. "Of course. I'm glad you agree," I said. "There's a difference between something cheap and something meant to last." I picked my fork back up. His expression changed just slightly. Not enough to make him suspicious. Enough to make me know he had felt something. I could have ended it there. I could have leaned across the table and answered Colette in fluent French. For about 10 minutes I wanted to. Then dessert was cleared, and the conversation changed. Colette leaned toward Adrian, not toward her husband, toward her son. She asked him in French whether the papers were ready. Henri barely looked away from his espresso. He said they would probably have them the following week. I kept my attention on my coffee. Papers. What papers? Henri said a word I caught clearly. Trust. Then another phrase, estate arrangement. The rest came too fast and too low, with a waiter passing behind me, but I heard enough to know they were not discussing wedding invitations. And then Henri said something I have never forgotten. He called me desperate for approval. Pathetic, he said. Colette gave a quiet laugh. Adrian laughed too. My daughter's fiancé. The man who had sat in my kitchen 4 months earlier asking for my blessing. The man who had looked me in the eye and told me he understood what Claire meant to me. He leaned toward his parents and said in French, "That's why it works. He wants Claire happy so badly he'll sign anything. He's predictable." Then he turned toward my daughter. Same face, same soft voice, same hand reaching across the table for hers. "You having a good time, babe?" "The best," Claire said. She kissed his cheek. I looked at him and understood something that hurt worse than every insult his parents had made all evening. Adrian was not simply marrying my daughter. At least part of him was performing the role of marrying my daughter. For whose benefit, and for what purpose, I still did not know. Every instinct in me wanted to get up. I wanted to ask Henri, in French, what papers he needed me to sign. I wanted Claire to take the ring off right there, but I knew my daughter. If I exploded over a conversation she had not heard, she would defend Adrian. She would tell me I misunderstood. His parents would act wounded. And I would become exactly what they needed me to become, the suspicious American father who could not stand the idea of his daughter marrying into another family. So I did nothing. At least, nothing they could see. I paid the bill. I left a cash tip. I shook Henri's hand outside. I told Colette the dinner had been lovely. She thanked me. I almost smiled at that. Then I walked Claire and Adrian toward the valet. She hugged me before she left. "Dad, thank you. I know tonight wasn't easy." "You're welcome, sweetheart." She had no idea. I got into my old Tacoma and sat there with the engine off for several minutes. They thought I was a fool. Worse, they thought my love for my daughter made me useful. I kept hearing one word: predictable. Then I thought about the trust, the papers, the way Adrian had said I would sign anything. I started the truck, and before I pulled out, I made myself one promise. I would not accuse anyone until I knew exactly what they expected me to sign. I would let them keep speaking. I would let them keep underestimating me. And when I finally asked them to explain themselves, I wanted them to have nowhere to hide. On the drive home, I replayed the dinner in order. The wine, my job, Claire's dress, the bookshelf. Then the trust. That last part was different. Snobbery is unpleasant, but it does not require paperwork. People do not fly across the Atlantic and discuss signatures over espresso because they dislike a contractor's accent. Something practical was hiding underneath the contempt, and Adrian was inside it. That was what made me slow down every time I came to a yellow light that night. I knew myself well enough to understand that anger can make a man confuse suspicion with proof. I had heard enough to worry. I had not heard enough to accuse. There is a difference, and I needed to respect it for Claire's sake. Claire texted before I reached home. "Dad, thank you for tonight. It meant everything to me that you tried so hard with them." I read the message in my driveway, twice. Then I wrote back, "Anything for you, sweetheart. Get some sleep." After that, I called Nolan Pierce. Nolan and I had worked together during my Leon years. After leaving construction, he moved into corporate risk consulting. He knew Europe. More importantly, he knew how to find out whether a company was what it claimed to be. It was nearly midnight. He answered on the third ring. "Bennett, I haven't heard from you in years." "I need a favor." "What kind?" "The kind you charge people for now." He laughed once. Then he heard my voice. "What happened?" "I need you to look at a family and their businesses." Quietly. The next morning, I started playing the role Henri and Colette had already written for me. Helpful, grateful, a little unsophisticated, and eager to please the people my daughter wanted as family. I called Claire before breakfast. What if Adrian's parents stayed in the guest house for the rest of their visit? She went quiet. "Dad, really?" "Sure. Saves them the drive from the hotel. They can see a little more of the county." "You don't have to do that." "I know." Her voice softened. "That would mean a lot to me." That part hurt, because everything I was doing was for her, and she still believed I was the one trying to earn acceptance. Henri and Colette moved into the guest house on Thursday. I had built it years earlier, the same summer I made Claire's bookshelf. For the next several days, I became exactly the man they expected. I asked Colette about her garden in Normandy. I listened while Henri corrected the way I grilled pork. On Sunday, he stood beside my smoker with a glass of wine and explained how a proper marinade would improve the meat. I nodded. I'll remember that. He seemed pleased. They slipped into French more often as the days passed, not constantly. Enough. Having them in the guest house gave me something I had not planned on at first. Time. Time to watch how Henri spoke when Claire was not around. Time to see how quickly Colette stopped pretending to be impressed by anything I owned. Time to notice that Adrien became more attentive whenever his father mentioned land, business, or the wedding paperwork. Nothing they did by itself proved a thing. That mattered. I did not want to become the kind of father who builds a case out of facial expressions because he dislikes the man his daughter loves. So I kept separating what I knew from what I only suspected. What I knew was that they had discussed a trust. What I knew was that Adrien believed I would sign it. Everything else still needed to be earned. Most of what they said was ordinary. Complaints about the humidity. Comments about the house. Colette thought the guest room mattress was too firm. Henri disliked American coffee. None of that mattered. I listened for the things that did. Late Thursday night, after the lights in the guest house went dark, I sat in the Tacoma and called Nolan. He answered immediately. What did you find? There was no small talk. Paul, Henri Laurent's import company, is barely functioning. I stared across the yard. Nolan continued. It went into restructuring about 2 years ago. It never really recovered. There are tax liens connected to the family estate in Normandy going back 3 years. How bad? Bad enough that normal refinancing probably isn't solving it. I tightened my hand around the phone. And Adrien? A pause. He has an active civil case against him in France. For what? Failed import-export venture. Investors lost money. Nothing I've found says criminal, but it is significant. Claire knows none of this. You're sure? I'm sure. Nolan was silent for a second. You also mentioned a trust. I heard them talking about one. If the structure is what I think it is, that may be the reason they're here. I looked toward the guest house. Explain. If they can put valuable American property into a joint structure, depending on how it's written, it can become collateral, liquidity, a way to keep a failing operation alive. I did not answer. Nolan did not try to fill the silence. The people sleeping 50 yards from me had crossed an ocean for my daughter's wedding. Maybe. But now there was another possibility sitting beside it. They might have crossed an ocean because I owned something they needed. And Adrien knew. That was the part I kept coming back to. His parents could have been desperate. His father could have pressured him. But Adrien had sat beside Claire at dinner and laughed when Henri said I was easy to manipulate. He had said I would sign anything. He had called me predictable. The opportunity to find out came that Sunday. I invited Henri and Colette to brunch on the back porch. Virginia ham. Biscuits, French roast coffee, partly because I knew Henri would approve. Halfway through the meal, he set his cup down. Paul, Adrien tells us you own commercial acreage near the highway. I do. In Europe, families often consolidate assets. It makes planning simpler. I watched him carefully. We are preparing a family trust through our estate attorneys, something for Claire and Adrien, something that protects both families long term. There it was. Colette leaned in. Family to family. We only want security for the children. I scratched my jaw. What would I have to do? Henri smiled. Nothing difficult. Review the draft. If you are comfortable, Contribute the commercial property to the structure. I let my face show exactly the amount of confusion he expected. I build houses, Henri. Trusts aren't really my language. Colette smiled. No one expects you to understand every detail. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, have your people send me the draft. I'll look it over. Henri's eyes changed. Just a little. Relief. Maybe triumph. That night I sat in my study with the document spread across the desk. And I will admit something that matters. I did not understand it. I can read a blueprint upside down in the rain. I can look at a foundation plan and see where somebody saved money before the first shovel hits dirt. But legal structures are another world. The words blurred together. Irrevocable. Beneficial interest. Collateral. Offshore entity. For almost an hour, pride kept me from making the call I needed to make. Then I pictured Claire signing something similar because Adrian told her it was for their future. I picked up my phone. Samuel Hart had handled my land deals and contract disputes for 15 years. He answered after 10. Paul Bennett calling this late? I assume somebody set something on fire. I need you to translate lawyer into carpenter. That bad? I don't know yet. I read him several sections. He stopped me. Send the whole thing. 10 minutes later he called back. His voice had changed. Paul, this is not a normal family trust. What is it? It's a cross-collateralization structure. Carpenter terms, Sam. He exhaled. Your commercial land becomes security for debt connected to Henri's European entity. If that entity defaults, the lenders have a claim against the property. I sat back. So I'm not putting land into something for Claire. No, I'm guaranteeing his debts. That is what this appears designed to do. The room went very quiet. After Samuel explained the document, I asked him to go through it again. Slower this time. I wanted to know which part did what. He walked me through the structure piece by piece. The language was dressed up as family planning, but the practical effect was much simpler. The land I had spent years acquiring and improving could be used to support obligations that had nothing to do with Claire. That was the first moment I stopped wondering whether I had misunderstood the dinner. The dinner had only shown me their attitude. The document showed me the mechanism, and Adrian had known enough about that mechanism to joke that I would sign. I put my hand flat on the desk. For years I had told Claire that if a contract feels too complicated to explain plainly, you do not sign it until somebody can. Now the rule had come back to me in the worst possible way. I remembered Nolan telling me the company was failing. I remembered Henri on my porch talking about family protection. I remembered Adrian laughing in French. He'll sign anything. Predictable. For the first time since the dinner, I knew exactly what they wanted. My daughter was not the only target. Neither was I. The wedding was the bridge. My property was the destination. Samuel told me to send everything Nolan had found. I did. Then I stayed in my study for a long time after the call ended. I was angry, but not in the way I expected. The hotter part had burned off. What was left was something steadier. I did not need to beat these people at some game. I needed them to tell the truth in front of Claire. That was all. The next morning, Henri was sitting on the back porch with coffee. I joined him. I read the draft last night. He lowered his cup. And? It's a lot. He gave a sympathetic smile. These things always look more complicated on paper. I believe it could be good for Claire. His shoulders relaxed. But I want to do it properly. Of course. I'm going to have my family attorney prepare a clean master agreement, something everybody can understand. We can sign it together at the rehearsal dinner." For the first time, he looked surprised. Only for a second. Then his smile widened. "A public signing. Family all there. Seems right." Henri nodded slowly. "Very meaningful." Colette came outside a minute later. When Henri told her, she clasped her hands together. "Oh, Paul, that is wonderful. It means a lot to me too." And that was true, just not for the reason they thought. From that moment on, they stopped being careful. Not completely. Enough. They believed the difficult part was finished. Samuel worked through the documents with me every evening. Nolan sent translated records. Tax liens, business filings, information about Adrian's civil case. Nothing magical. Nothing hidden in a vault. Just facts they had counted on us never putting together. During the day, I still sat across from Henri at breakfast. I still let Colette correct my pronunciation. Adrian came by and called me Pop. I let him. Claire, meanwhile, was happier than I had seen her in years. That was the worst part of those days. She sent me photos of centerpiece options, seating charts, her rehearsal dinner dress. A message came one afternoon, white roses or wildflowers. I stared at the screen. Wildflowers, I typed. Always. The rehearsal dinner was Saturday. String lights were hung between the old oak trees I had planted the year Claire was born. Long tables sat under white linen. The centerpieces were wildflowers in mason jars, black-eyed Susans, Queen Anne's lace, exactly the kind of thing she wanted. About 40 people came, family, friends, her college roommates. People who had watched Claire grow up. Henri and Colette stood near the head of the table with champagne. My champagne. They looked completely at ease. Adrian looked even more comfortable. He had the face of a man who believed the last difficult conversation had already happened. Samuel was there too. To everyone else, he looked like an old family friend in a blazer drinking club soda. Only he and I knew what was in the folder locked in his car. At one point, I saw Colette lean toward Adrian near the drinks. The band was warming up and I could not hear every word, but I heard enough French to catch her glance toward me. Look at him smiling. Adrian said something back and smiled into his glass. I did not need the rest. I had heard enough. A little later, I found Claire near the dessert table, laughing with two friends. The string lights caught the edge of her dress. For 1 second, I nearly changed my mind. Not about stopping the trust, about doing this in front of everyone. There are truths you want to deliver privately. There are others that have been protected by secrecy for too long. I knew what I was about to do would break her heart, but I would rather she learn the truth before the wedding than after she had tied her life to people who had hidden this much from her. I picked up my glass and tapped it with my ring. The conversations faded. If everybody can give me a minute, I promise I won't keep you from dinner long. A few people laughed. Claire looked at me and smiled. Most of you know speeches aren't my thing, I said. I'd rather be on a roof than stand in front of 40 people. Another laugh. Good. I looked at my daughter. She's getting married in 2 weeks, and I've spent most of her life wanting one thing for her. I want her to know the people beside her mean what they say. Adrian's smile stayed in place. Then I raised my glass toward Henri and Colette. I also want to thank our guests for traveling all the way from Normandy. Henri gave me a gracious nod. The pleasure is ours, Paul. I'm sure. Colette's smile tightened slightly. I continued. And because they came so far, I thought it would be respectful to say the rest in their language. Henri stopped moving. So did Colette. Then I spoke French. Not slowly, not badly. The way I had learned it 25 years earlier, surrounded by men who had no patience for an American who could not keep up. I told Henri that for 3 weeks I had listened while he and his wife insulted my work, my home, and my daughter. I told Colette I remembered what she said about Claire's dress. I reminded Henri of the restaurant. Then I repeated the sentence that mattered most. The father is desperate for approval. He'll sign anything. He's predictable. Adrien shoved his chair back. Paul, I looked at him. No. He stopped. I turned back to the guests. I understood every word. Nobody moved for a moment. Then everyone seemed to move at once. People looked toward Henri, then Colette, then Adrien, finally Claire. Her smile was gone. Dad? I'm sorry, sweetheart. What are you talking about? Samuel brought me the folder. I laid it on the table. 2 weeks ago, Henri and Colette asked me to put my commercial property into what they called a family trust. Henri started to speak. I raised my hand. Please, you had 3 weeks to talk. He closed his mouth. I opened the folder. They said the trust was for Claire and Adrien. What the agreement actually does is place my commercial property into a structure that can secure debt tied to Henri's European business. Murmurs moved around the tables. Henri's face had gone tight. I continued. His company has been struggling for 2 years. There are tax liens against the family estate. That is private financial information, Colette said. Yes. I looked at her. And you were going to make my property responsible for it. Adrien stood. That isn't fair. Claire turned toward him. What isn't fair? He looked at her. The way he's presenting it. Then present it. Adrien opened his mouth. Nothing came. Claire's voice changed. Did you know? Claire? Did you know what the trust did? He looked toward his father. That was answer enough. But I still had one more fact. Adrien also has an active civil case in France connected to a failed business venture. Claire stared at him. You never told me that. It was handled. No, you didn't tell me. It wasn't relevant to us. She looked at the folder. You were asking my father to put his property into your family's trust. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Then Adrien took a step toward her. She stepped back. He stopped. For the first time that night, I saw panic on his face. Not because of me, because Claire was no longer listening to him the way she had before. She looked at his parents, then at him. Did you call my father predictable? Adrien glanced at Henri. Claire waited. Did you? His shoulders lowered. It was a private conversation. She nodded once. Then she pulled the ring from her finger. No speech, no screaming. She placed it on his plate beside the food he had barely touched. I was going to marry you, Claire, and you let me plan a wedding while your family planned around my father's land. That is not what I wanted. But you knew. He said nothing. Claire stood. Then she walked toward me. Not behind me. Beside me. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I did not. My daughter's engagement had ended at a dinner I hosted. There is no victory in watching your child realize the person she trusted had been using information she did not have. There was one practical matter left. I took another document from the folder and handed it to Adrien. He looked at it. What is this? An itemized bill for the expenses your parents accumulated while staying in my guest house, and written notice that they need to leave the property tomorrow morning. Henri finally spoke. Paul, surely this can be discussed. I looked at him. We have discussed a great deal. He stared at me. I switched to French for one sentence. More than you realized. His face hardened. I returned to English. The guest house is unlocked tonight. They can collect their things. If they prefer a hotel, that's their choice. Colette's voice rose. You invited us. I did. For family. I did that too. She seemed ready to say more. Then she looked around and saw the faces watching her. She stopped. I picked up my champagne glass and took one sip. Then I looked at Henri. And yes, I paid for the dinner. His jaw tightened. I set the glass down. For a practical man, I spend money strangely sometimes. He knew exactly what I meant. Claire looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she was standing straight. You ready? I asked. She nodded. We walked away from the table together, past the wildflowers, past the white linen, past the string lights. Behind us, Colette called Claire's name. My daughter did not turn around. Neither did I. We crossed the yard toward the house. Halfway there, Claire reached for my hand. She had done that when she was small, usually when crossing a parking lot. Sometimes when she was tired. For years I had forgotten what it felt like. Dad? Yeah? You really understood them the whole time? Every word that mattered. She was quiet. Then she said, Thank you for hearing what I couldn't. I squeezed her hand. Behind us, the string lights still glowed over the tables. The champagne glasses were still full. Adrian's ring sat where Claire had left it. Henri and Colette had crossed an ocean, believing the quiet American contractor across the table could not understand a word they were saying. They had been wrong, not because I was smarter than they were, because they had mistaken silence for ignorance. And by the time they understood the difference, Claire had already heard enough. If you enjoyed the story, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'll see you in the next one.